Snow slammed against the diner's glass like a fist that wouldn't stop. Inside, the lights were dead, the heater gone cold, and Kesha had exactly $7.32 left to her name. Her son, 2 years old, was shaking in her arms when a sound rose from the storm. Not the wind, not thunder. Engines. 25 of them. Headlights cut through the snow like ghosts lining up at her door. "Ma'am," a voice shouted, "we need shelter." She had no idea that saying yes would summon 1,500 roaring motorcycles 3 days later, changing not only her life, but an entire city's. Before we roll back, tell me where you're watching from and hit subscribe. Because tomorrow we ride into what kindness really means. The clock on the cracked kitchen wall ticked like it was mocking her. Kesha Williams sat at the small wooden table inside her half-frozen home, her hands trembling as she counted a stack of crumpled bills and loose coins. $7.32. That was all that stood between her little boy and an empty belly come morning. The single candle on the table flickered, throwing long, nervous shadows across the peeling wallpaper. Outside, wind howled through the gaps in the boarded windows, carrying the sound of something metallic scraping a trash can lid, or maybe the ghost of another bill she couldn't pay. Her son, Marcus, slept in the corner of the kitchen, cocooned in a nest of old blankets and couch cushions. His tiny chest rose and fell beneath layers of faded fabric, his breath visible in the freezing air. The heater had died weeks ago, and she couldn't afford to fix it, so she'd moved them both into the kitchen, her only room with a working gas stove. The stove hissed faintly, blue flame, whispering in protest against the cold. Kesha leaned over it, hands extended to steal its fragile warmth. Her palms were raw from scrubbing floors. The creases between her fingers still smelled faintly of bleach. She whispered to the dark, "Why'd you have to leave us?" Jerome. The name felt foreign now. Her ex-husband had disappeared 8 months ago. He'd found himself in Tennessee, with a 23-year-old waitress and no child support payments. The divorce papers on top of the fridge were stamped with red ink, finalized, but nothing about her life felt finished. Her phone buzzed on the table, screen lighting her face in harsh blue. A text from her manager at the cleaning company. "Don't bother coming in tomorrow. We're letting you go. Your kid cried too much during your shift." Customers complained. The words punched the air from her lungs. Third job lost in 2 months. The laundromat had fired her when Marcus got sick. The diner let her go when she nodded off during her double shift. She stared at the message until the battery died, the light fading like her last bit of hope. By sunrise, the snow had started. Fine, powdery flakes at first, floating down over the cracked rooftops of Detroit's east side. Kesha stood at her front window, watching the street turn white as she stirred a pot of chicken and dumplings on the stove. Marcus babbled from his high chair, his tiny fingers gripping a chipped spoon. "Mama cold," he said, rubbing his little hands together. "I know, baby." She added another blanket around his shoulders. "Mama's gonna fix it." She wasn't sure who she was lying to, him or herself. When the storm alert crackled through the radio, it sounded like a warning from God himself. Blizzard conditions across Wayne County. Temperatures dropping below zero. Stay indoors. By noon, the power flickered once, twice, then went black. The fridge died with a sigh. The house fell into a thick, humming silence. She lit candles one by one, setting them in old mason jars. The light painted the kitchen gold, but the air was arctic. "Okay, stove," she murmured. "Don't you kid on me too." When the dark got too heavy, she pulled down the old wooden recipe box from her mother's cupboard. It smelled like paprika and thyme. Inside were yellowed cards, covered in her mother's neat cursive Southern soul food, in ink and grease stains. Grandma's fried chicken, the recipe that had fed 3 generations of women who refused to give up. Kesha smiled faintly through the exhaustion. Her mother had always said, that recipe might save you one day. She hadn't believed her then. She did now. She set out flour, salt, cayenne, and oil. Her mother's voice played in her head as she worked 2 pinches, not 3. Let it rest 10 minutes before the oil. Patience. Girl. Good food takes listening. As the chicken sizzled, the smell filled the small kitchen warm, alive, defiant. The scent of memory fighting back against the cold. Marcus clapped his hands, giggling. Mama cooking. Yes, baby, she said softly. Mama's cooking. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a restaurant, a neon sign that said Mama K's Kitchen, soul food made with love. A place full of music, laughter, people who didn't look away when she spoke. The fantasy vanished as quickly as it came when the window rattled from the wind. Outside, snow was falling so fast that the houses across the street blurred into ghosts. By Christmas Eve, the storm was biblical. Snow hammered the house with such force it sounded like sandpaper against glass. Kesha kept Marcus in the kitchen, wrapped in blankets, feeding him warm broth from a chipped mug. The thermostat blinked an error she'd never seen before. System failure. Please. No, she whispered, pressing buttons that did nothing. Marcus whimpered, his breath fogging the air. She picked him up and pressed him close to her chest, feeling his small heart flutter like a trapped bird. Shh. Mama's here. We'll make it through this. We always do. Then, a sound, faint at first, buried beneath the wind. A low, steady rumble, like thunder rolling uphill. She froze. The sound grew louder. Engines, many of them cutting through the snow. She ran to the window. Through the frost and candlelight, she saw them, 25 figures in heavy leather jackets, lined up in her driveway, their headlights slicing through the storm. Motorcycles, big ones, Harley Davidsons. Her pulse spiked. Who rides in a blizzard? The engines died one by one until silence pressed against the walls. Then came the knock, 3 hard raps that shook the door. Marcus stirred, whimpering in her arms. She held her breath, listening. Ma'am, a voice shouted over the wind. Deep, rough. Desperate. We're freezing out here. Please. We just need shelter. Kesha stared at the door, paralyzed. Every warning her mother had ever given her about strange men flashed in her head. She thought about the stories, the news, the gangs, the violence, but she also thought about the man's voice. It wasn't angry. It was pleading. Marcus coughed again, his body trembling. The house was an icebox now. She had to make a choice. Her mother's words echoed through her memory. When someone's in trouble, you help them. Doesn't matter what they look like. One day, baby, you'll need someone brave enough to do the same. Kesha took a deep breath, shifted Marcus to one arm, and grabbed the flashlight. Her hands were shaking as she reached for the deadbolt. Are you really hurt? She called through the door. Yes, ma'am. The same voice shouted. One of our guys is bleeding bad. We've been trying to find shelter since the highway went dark. How many of you? 25. Ma'am. The number hit her like a slap. 25 strangers. In the middle of the worst blizzard in decades, and she was alone with her child. Marcus's tiny hand touched her face, cold and trusting. Mama's safe, he whispered. Maybe, she said softly. Maybe safe is something we make. She undid the lock. The door swung open into a wall of white snow poured in like a living thing, swirling around heavy boots, and the shape of a man built like a truck. He pulled off his helmet. His beard was thick with ice, his eyes sharp but kind. Thank you, he said simply. Name's Mike. We won't forget this. Behind him, 2 dozen figures stood at attention. Shivering, soaked, and utterly exhausted, Kesha stepped back. "Come in before you all freeze to death." One by one, the bikers entered quietly, respectfully, like men entering a church. They wiped their boots, shook off snow, nodded in silent gratitude. Mike shut the door behind him, sealing out the howling storm. For the first time in days, Kesha realized she wasn't alone anymore. The flicker of candlelight danced over leather jackets, tattoos, and faces weathered by miles of road. Her kitchen, tiny, cramped, and full of strangers, suddenly felt alive. The men spoke in low tones, helping one another remove wet gloves and helmets. "Got a med kit?" Mike asked. "Bathroom cabinet," Kesha replied automatically. "Top shelf." They worked in sync, veteran hands, moving with precision. Kesha bandaged the injured man's leg, while Mike held a flashlight steady. The room smelled of antiseptic and frying oil. Outside, the storm screamed, but inside there was something else now. Something she hadn't felt in years. Warmth, and the faint beginning of hope. The storm roared against the windows, like an angry animal trying to claw its way in. Inside, 25 men filled Kesha's tiny house, dripping snow onto the worn linoleum floor. Steam rose from their jackets as the candlelight flickered across their faces, hard, lined, exhausted, but unmistakably human. Kesha clutched Marcus close, her pulse drumming in her ears, the sound of boots scuffing, low voices murmuring, and the hiss of melting ice created a rhythm both alien and strangely comforting. Mike, the tall man with the snow-crusted beard, stood near the door, scanning the room like someone used to taking command. He caught her eye and softened his voice. "We'll stay out of your way. Ma'am, we just need to get warm. That's all. No trouble. You have my word." Kesha nodded but said nothing. Her body was tight as a bowstring, every instinct screaming to stay alert. Yet something about the man's tone, the quiet respect in it, kept her rooted in place. Instead of running for the phone she couldn't use anyway. One of the bikers removed his helmet and revealed a younger face than she expected, barely mid-20s, with kind eyes above a lip split open from the cold. He caught her looking. "I'm Tommy," he said with a small, awkward wave. "We'll help clean up the mess when this is all over. Promise." Kesha managed a weak smile. "Long as you don't mind washing dishes?" A ripple of chuckles broke through the tension like the first crack of sunlight after a storm. They began organizing themselves with practiced discipline. Wet jackets hung neatly over chairs, boots lined up near the door. It wasn't chaos. It was order born from years of surviving rough conditions together. Mike crouched beside a man slumped on the couch, his jeans soaked dark with blood near the thigh. "Danny's the one hurt," he said. "Took a spill on the ice a few miles back." Kesha moved before she thought. "I've got a first aid box." When she returned, Mike had already torn open the man's pant leg. The wound was deep but clean, probably from metal scraping asphalt. Blood welled steadily. Danny's face was pale beneath the grime. Kesha set down the box, her hands steady despite the shaking in her chest. "This'll sting," she said, pouring antiseptic over the wound. Danny hissed but didn't flinch. "You're good at this," he murmured. "My mama was a nurse," she replied. "Guess some things stick." Mike handed her gauze and tape like a field medic following orders. "Can you get it tight enough to stop the bleeding?" She nodded. "If I use pressure." He watched her work in silence. Around them, the other men moved quietly, one stoking the gas stove for warmth, another setting up a lantern near the table, two more shaking snow from their gloves. When Kesha finished, Danny managed a faint grin. "You saved me a trip to the ER," he said. "Don't thank me yet," she replied. "You'll need antibiotics once the road's open." Mike clapped the young man's shoulder, then turned to her. "You just saved his leg. Maybe his life, thank you. The sincerity in his voice startled her. She wasn't used to gratitude. It felt foreign and fragile. An hour later, the smell of food filled the house again. One of the men, Tommy, had found her flour and oil. Another produced canned beans and a bag of rice from his pack. Together they turned her kitchen into an impromptu mess hall, moving with the same coordination they had used for the road. "You mind if we cook, ma'am?" Tommy asked. "Please," Kesha said, too tired to protest. "But don't burn my mother's skillet or I'll kill you myself." Laughter again, low, genuine. The tension that had gripped the house began to loosen. Marcus peeked out from behind his blanket fortress, his wide eyes scanning the room. A man with gray at his temples spotted him and crouched low. "Well, look at that little man," he said softly. "You're braver than all of us." "Huh." Marcus blinked, then held up his toy spoon. "Mama cook." The biker grinned. "Then Mama's the hero of the night." Kesha bit back a laugh. For the first time in days, her son wasn't shivering. The group moved like a family around the table, someone slicing bread, someone stirring broth, someone wiping down counters. It was surreal. 25 leather-clad giants doing domestic chores in her kitchen while snow screamed outside. By the time they sat down to eat, the air was thick with the smell of fried chicken, beans, and melted wax. The storm had buried the world beyond her door, but inside, warmth pulsed like a living heart. Mike raised his tin mug. "To the lady who saved our hides tonight." A murmur of agreement passed through the room. Kesha blushed under the candlelight. "I didn't save anybody," she said. "You'd have done the same." "No," Mike said quietly. "Most wouldn't have opened the door." Something in his tone made her chest tighten. He wasn't wrong. They ate in near silence for several minutes, the sound of spoons clinking against plates, the crackle of the gas flame, Marcus's occasional giggle. After a while, Tommy cleared his throat. "You mind if we tell you who we are?" "Ma'am, I'd appreciate that," Kesha said dryly. "Seeing as I let 25 strangers into my house," he smiled. "Fair enough." Mike leaned back against the counter, his voice calm but heavy with history. "We're called the Iron Shields. Veterans, mostly Army, Marines, Navy. We ride to remember who we used to be. Hard to fit back into regular life when you've lived by different rules." Tommy added, "We do charity runs, deliver food, toys for kids, rebuild homes for vets. People see the leather and think gang. Truth is, we're just trying to take care of each other." Kesha studied their faces. Scarred, weathered, tired. Men who had seen too much but still carried something good inside. She looked at Mike. "You were in the service too." 15 years. He said, "Lost more friends than I can count. Lost my little girl too. Cancer." His voice faltered. The room went still. "She was 6. He continued softly. "Her name was Emily. My wife left after she died. Said she couldn't stand the silence." Kesha felt the words hit something deep. She thought of Jerome's empty chair, the space beside her bed that stayed cold. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Mike nodded once, eyes fixed on the floor. "Writing helps. Feels like moving forward even when you're not sure where you're going." Danny, pale but smiling from the couch, chimed in. "You'd be surprised how many people we meet who treat us like monsters." "You didn't." "That means something." Kesha looked around at the circle of men, at her son asleep in Tommy's lap, and felt something shift inside her. Maybe fear and kindness weren't opposites. Maybe they were the same thing, choices made in the dark. Sometime after midnight, the wind eased into a low moan. The candles burned lower, their wax pooling across the table like melted gold. The house had settled into a quiet rhythm, soft snoring, the creak of floorboard, the gentle whistle of air through the stove vent. Kesha sat by the window, watching snow pile high against the glass. Mike approached, moving carefully so he wouldn't wake the others. "You should sleep," he said. "I can't," she replied. "Storm's still angry. Feels wrong to close my eyes." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I know the feeling. In Afghanistan, we used to call it the hum. The sound of your nerves still waiting for something to go wrong." Kesha exhaled, half a laugh. "Then I've been in a war zone my whole life." They shared a tired smile. The silence between them was warm, not awkward. Mike glanced at Marcus, now sprawled across Tommy's arm. "Your boy's strong. Reminds me of my kid. Same is stubborn, yo." "Stubborn's a survival skill," she said. He looked at her then. "Really look. You've got it too." Her eyes met his, and for a heartbeat the room faded. The noise, the storm, the exhaustion. Two people, broken in different ways, saw the same kind of strength reflected back. Mike cleared his throat, stepping back. "We'll be gone when the roads open. But I want you to know we don't forget kindness. Ever." Kesha nodded, unsure how to respond. "Just make sure you all leave alive. That's thanks enough." He smiled faintly. "Deal." Sometime in the pre-dawn hours, a low groan broke the silence. Danny was shivering violently on the couch, sweat glistening on his forehead. Kesha was on her feet in seconds. She touched his skin burning hot. "He's got a fever," she said sharply. Mike was beside her instantly, his voice hard with command. "Medic kit." Now, they surrounded the young man as Kesha fetched water and towels. The bikers moved with military efficiency, but fear lurked behind their discipline. She wrung out a cloth and placed it on Danny's forehead, then began cooling his chest and neck. "Don't let him overheat," she said. "He's fighting infection. Keep him hydrated." Tommy watched, helpless. "We've seen guys go downhill fast like this overseas. What if—" Kesha cut him off. "He's not dying tonight." For hours, she worked changing compresses, forcing small sips of water past Danny's lips, whispering to him as if words alone could pull him back. The bikers sat in silence, their rough faces illuminated by candlelight, watching this woman fight for one of their own. At last, near dawn, the fever broke. Danny's breathing slowed. The redness drained from his cheeks. Kesha slumped against the wall, exhausted. "He's stable now." A long breath rippled through the room. Mike closed his eyes, relief softening his battle-hardened features. "You saved him," he said simply. Kesha shook her head. "We saved him." He studied her, the faintest hint of a smile curving his mouth. "You ever think about being a nurse?" She laughed quietly. "I'm just trying to keep my kid alive." "Mike, that's enough for me." He nodded, but the look in his eyes said he didn't believe her. When the first pale light of morning crept through the frost-covered window, Kesha looked around her living room at the sleeping bikers. The soft crackle of cooling embers, the small, rhythmic breathing of her son. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel like a burden. It felt alive. She made coffee on the stove, the smell filling the air. Mike stirred awake and joined her, rubbing the back of his neck. "Storm's easing," he said. "We'll head out soon as the roads open." Kesha poured 2 mugs. "Take some for the road." He accepted it with a nod. "You've got a good heart, Kesha. Don't let the world break it." She smiled faintly. "Too late for that. But maybe it's like the coffee tastes better with a few cracks." Mike chuckled softly, lifting his mug in salute. "To cracks. Then, to surviving them," she replied. By mid-morning, the snow had begun to thin into gentle flakes. The world outside shimmered white and still. One by one, the bikers gathered their gear, thanking her quietly. Danny, pale but walking, gave her a shy grin. "Guess I owe you my leg, maybe my life. Pay it forward," she said. When the last of them stepped out into the melting light, Mike turned back at the door. He pressed a thick envelope into her hand. "It's not charity," he said before she could protest. It's payment for saving our brother. We don't leave debts unpaid. She stared at it, too stunned to speak. Take care of that boy, he added, and don't give up on that fried chicken dream. The world needs food made with love. Then he was gone, swallowed by the bright morning and the thunder of engines rising in unison. Kesha stood in the doorway long after the sound faded, the envelope heavy in her palm. Inside, her son stirred awake and called softly, "Mama, I'm here." "Baby," she said, smiling through tears. "We're okay now." But deep down, she knew something had shifted forever, that the storm had brought not just strangers to her door, but the first spark of a story that was only beginning. The house had never been so still. No boots thudding across the floor, no low laughter rumbling like thunder, no clatter of pans, only the ticking of the clock and the faint hiss of wind pressing against the windows. Kesha stood in the doorway, staring at the faint imprint of boot soles on her linoleum. The scent of leather and wood smoke still lingered, blending with the faint sweetness of the fried chicken they had cooked together. Marcus was playing on the floor with a bent spoon, the same one Tommy had given him to stir invisible soup. She should have felt relieved. Instead, the silence was unbearable. She picked up the envelope Mike had left. $800. To anyone else, it might have been a small gesture. To her, it was months of survival, enough to fix the heater, pay off the power bill, and maybe, just maybe, buy real kitchen supplies again. But as she touched the bills, guilt crawled under her skin. The money felt like it had come from another world, one she didn't belong to. By the third day, reality returned with the relentlessness of winter. The power company restored electricity to Maple Street, and the neighbors resumed pretending she didn't exist. When Kesha reopened her small home restaurant, the snow outside was still piled high, but the warmth inside was gone. No laughter, no brotherhood, only the quiet scrape of her spatula on the pan. 4 customers came the first day. One of them was the mailman. He didn't stay. The second day brought none. On the third day, Marcus developed a cough that wouldn't stop. "Mama, hot," he whimpered, pressing his hand to his tiny chest. Her stomach clenched. She touched his forehead. Fever. She boiled water, searched for the last of the children's medicine, and realized it had expired months ago. The pharmacy was too far to walk in the cold, and she didn't own a car. Her mind raced through possibilities. None good. Then she thought of Mrs. Henderson. The knock on Mrs. Henderson's pristine white door echoed like a gunshot. When the older woman appeared, her face tightened the moment she saw who stood on the porch. "What do you want?" Kesha swallowed. "My boy's sick. He's burning up. I was hoping you might have some children's medicine I could borrow just until tomorrow." Mrs. Henderson's lips curled as if she'd tasted something sour. "I told you before, I don't involve myself with your kind of trouble. Please," Kesha said, holding Marcus tighter. "He's only 2. The older woman's eyes flicked to the child, then back. "That's not my problem." When Kesha tried to explain, Mrs. Henderson shoved the door, the edge catching Kesha's shoulder. "Take your bastard child and go before I call the police." The slam reverberated through her bones. She stood there a moment, stunned, before the tears came hot, humiliating, unstoppable. "Mama hurt," Marcus whispered, touching her face. "I'm okay, baby." She lied. Mama's okay. But she wasn't. She was shaking from cold and anger, from the realization that kindness could be as rare as sunlight in winter. As she trudged back down the icy sidewalk, a voice called out from a few houses away. "Honey, you all right?" Kesha turned. On a small porch stood an elderly black woman with silver hair pinned in a bun, and eyes that radiated warmth. "I saw that nonsense," the woman said. "That Henderson woman's heart's been frozen for years. You come on inside before that baby catches pneumonia." Kesha hesitated. Strangers had already rewritten her life once. Still, Marcus shivered in her arms, and instinct took over. The woman introduced herself as Martha Lewis. Her house was modest but immaculate, filled with the smell of bread baking. "You sit right here," Martha said, guiding her to an old armchair near the fire. "Let me see that little angel." She checked Marcus's temperature, listened to his breathing with a weathered stethoscope, and nodded. "Just a fever and a cough. He'll be fine once we get some medicine and warm milk in him." Kesha blinked. "You're a nurse." "Was," Martha said, "retired a long time ago. But some things don't leave your hands." She handed Kesha a bottle of children's syrup and a mug of milk sweetened with honey. Then, from a kitchen drawer, she pulled a small envelope. "This is for you," she said. "I can't take your money." "You can, and you will," Martha replied firmly. "You're a mother doing your best. The world doesn't make that easy. Let someone help you for once." Kesha felt the dam inside her crack. She took the envelope, whispering, "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Martha said. "Just promise me you'll keep going. The Lord sends people when we need them most. Sometimes we don't recognize them until later." That night, as Marcus slept peacefully for the first time in days, Kesha sat by the window watching snow swirl under the streetlight. Martha's kindness had reminded her of something she'd almost forgotten, that good still existed. She thought of the bikers, their laughter, their order, the way they'd filled her empty house with life. The world had told her they were dangerous. Her heart told her they were brothers. She pressed her hand against the cold glass, staring at the dark horizon beyond Maple Street. "Where are you now?" she whispered. The question hung in the air, unanswered. 3 days later, she felt it before she heard it, a vibration. Faint at first, barely more than a shiver under her feet. She froze, glancing around the kitchen. A cup trembled on the counter. Marcus looked up from his toys, eyes wide. "Mama." "Truck." The sound deepened. Not one truck, many. A rolling thunder that grew until the dishes in her cabinet rattled. She hurried to the window and pulled aside the curtain. At the far end of Maple Street, a line of headlights glimmered through the snow like approaching star. Dozens, then hundreds. Engines roared low, powerful, unending. The air itself seemed to vibrate. Kesha's breath caught. "No way." Marcus squealed, clapping his hand. Bikes. Big bikes. Motorcycle after motorcycle rolled into view, chrome flashing under the pale winter sun. Leather jackets marked with the familiar insignia of the Iron Shield. Neighbors poured out of their houses in shock. Mrs. Henderson stood frozen on her porch, clutching her robe like armor. The roar grew louder until the entire street shook. Then silence. All 500 engines cut off in perfect unison. Kesha stepped outside, Marcus on her hip. The cold air bit her cheeks, but her mind barely registered it. Mike was at the front of the formation, helmet off, beard glinting with frost. Behind him were Tommy, Danny alive and strong, and row after row of riders stretching down the block. He walked toward her slowly. When he spoke, his voice carried easily in the stunned, quiet, "Kesha Williams," he said, "we told you we don't forget." She stared, speechless. Tommy came forward holding a thick manila envelope. "You fed us. You healed us. You treated us like family. So we brought the family back." "What is all this?" Kesha asked, her voice trembling. Mike gestured toward the crowd of riders. "Every chapter we know: Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee, Pittsburgh." Word spread. Everyone wanted to thank the woman who opened her door to 25 strangers in a blizzard. The neighbors gasped as the riders began unloading boxes, tools, lumber, paint, appliances. "We're here to rebuild your restaurant," Mike continued, properly this time. Kesha's eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to do this." "We do," he said, "because when you opened that door, you changed more lives than you'll ever know." The bikers moved like a well-oiled machine. Within minutes, groups divided into teams: electricians, carpenters, mechanics. Someone rolled in a generator. Another set up a massive outdoor grill. The once quiet street became an orchestra of hammering laughter, and country rock playing from portable speakers. Children ran between chrome bikes. Old men from the block brought coffee. Even Mrs. Henderson, pale and trembling, hovered on the curb, watching the spectacle with disbelief. Kesha stood in the center of it all, her apron fluttering in the cold wind, Marcus tugging her sleeve. "Mama, we fix house." She knelt, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "Yeah, baby, we're fixing everything." Danny limped over, healthier but still cautious on his bad leg. "You like surprises?" he asked, handing her a folded paper. She opened it. Inside was a design sketch: Mama Kesha's kitchen in bold letters, surrounded by the Iron Shield's emblem of wings and wheels. Tears blurred her vision. "Mike's idea," Danny said. "He says every good soldier needs a banner to fight under." Kesha laughed through her tears. "Then let's build it." By late afternoon, Maple Street looked nothing like itself. The bikers had painted her porch, reinforced the roof, and replaced the cracked kitchen window. Reporters arrived, cameras rolling. Someone handed Kesha a microphone, but she was too overwhelmed to speak. Mike stepped beside her. "You don't have to say anything," he murmured. "Just let the world see what kindness looks like." When she finally found her voice, it was shaky but clear. "People tell me good deeds don't come back," she said, "but I think they just take the long way home." Applause rippled through the crowd. Even Mrs. Henderson clapped, her face streaked with tears. She tried to hide. Martha arrived near sunset. Drawn by the noise, she stopped short at the sight of the motorcycles, then at Danny standing tall, smiling. Her breath caught Danny. He turned, confused. "Do I?" Martha stepped forward, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You had a crescent moon birthmark behind your ear, didn't you?" He froze. "How do you?" She reached out a trembling hand. "Because I'm your mother." Gasps spread through the crowd. Danny's mouth opened, then closed. He touched the chain around his neck, the old silver necklace he'd never taken off. He turned it over. "Love never dies" was engraved on the back. "Mama," he whispered. She threw her arms around him, sobbing. The bikers cheered. Kesha pressed a hand to her mouth, tears streaming freely. The news cameras caught every second of the reunion. The lost son found because a stranger once opened her door in a storm. When the cheering subsided, Mike handed Kesha another envelope. "This is the deed to your house," he said. "Paid off. In full. No more rent. No more fear." Kesha shook her head. "I can't." "You already earned it," Mike interrupted. "You built this family. We're just making it official." She opened the envelope and saw the notarized documents. Her knees went weak. Tommy stepped beside her, handing Marcus a tiny leather vest that read, "Little Angel." "For the youngest member of the Iron Shields," he said. Marcus grinned, spinning in circles to show it off. The crowd laughed. Even Mrs. Henderson approached, wringing her hands. "Miss Williams," she said softly, "I was wrong about you, about everything." Kesha studied the woman who had pushed her into the snow. The anger she expected wasn't there, only calm. "Everyone's welcome at Mama Kesha's kitchen," she said, "even those still learning what kindness means." Mrs. Henderson nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. When dusk fell, the Iron Shields lit hundreds of candles along the street. The glow turned Maple Street into a golden river stretching into the dark. Music filled the air, old blues, and gospel blending with laughter. The air smelled of barbecue, fried chicken, and winter air beginning to thaw. Martha, her hand in Danny's, whispered to Kesha, "Child, this is what heaven must look like. People finally seeing each other as they are." Kesha looked around at the crowd, neighbors, bikers, strangers, all bound by something invisible and stronger than fear. She lifted Marcus into her arms as fireworks burst above the horizon, reflected in his wide, wondering eyes. "Mama," he said sleepily, "they come back." "Yes, baby," she whispered, holding him close. They came home the morning after the motorcycles came. Maple Street no longer looked like Detroit. It looked like a movie set. Frost-gray dawn shimmered over a forest of chrome. Rows of Harleys glinted in the pale light, their engines silent now, their riders already at work. Tools clanked, radios hummed low blues riffs. The smell of fresh paint mingled with frying bacon from an improvised grill someone had built out of an oil drum. Kesha stepped onto her porch holding 2 mugs of coffee. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid to be seen. Mike was already awake, standing in the middle of the street, directing crews with the authority of a sergeant. "Morning, Mamaka," he said, taking the mug from her. Steam curled between them. "I still can't believe this is happening," she said. "Believe it," he replied, "because it's only getting bigger." By 8 a.m., the neighborhood had gathered. Kids in winter coats stood gaping as bikers in leather jackets carried lumber, ran extension cords, and unloaded industrial-grade kitchen equipment. Tommy had set up a folding table as operations central, maps and blueprints pinned beneath a rock to keep them from flying away. "You got your plumbing crew over there. Electrical here," he said. And someone found a damn espresso machine in a storage unit. The roar of a generator started. Lights flickered to life inside Kesha's house for the first time since the blizzard. Applause erupted spontaneously. Even the air felt warmer. News vans appeared next, 3, then 5, then a full-sized production truck. Reporters swarmed the scene, microphones raised like spears. "What's happening on Maple Street?" one shouted. "Is this a protest? A charity event?" Mike simply said, "It's a rebuild, a payback of kindness." The phrase stuck. Within an hour, "Rebuild of Kindness" was trending across Detroit. Kesha tried to keep working, mixing batter, seasoning chicken, but every few minutes someone wanted an interview. "Miss Williams, how did this all start?" "With dinner," she said, "and a door that needed opening." Her words played on every local newscast by noon. Strangers stopped by with groceries and cash donations. A city inspector arrived, shook Mike's hand, and waived half the usual permits under emergency reconstruction. And still the bikes kept coming. By midday, there were close to 2,000 people on Maple Street. Bikers, neighbors, volunteers, even off-duty firefighters offering tools. The noise should have been unbearable. Yet somehow, it sounded like hope. From the edge of the crowd, Martha watched, her silver hair catching sunlight. Next to her stood Danny, his arm draped protectively over her shoulders. They moved slowly through the organized chaos, both still stunned that 30 lost years had led them here. When Martha reached Kesha, she smiled through tears. "You see, baby, one open door and look what the Lord can build." Kesha grinned. "Guess he likes motorcycles." By afternoon, the house itself was transforming. Walls came down, new beams went up. Electricians strung lights across the ceiling. Painters rolled warm yellow over cold gray. A group of women bikers took over the kitchen, scrubbing every surface until it gleamed. They worked under Sarah Vega, Chicago chapter lead, former chef, who barked orders with joyful precision. "Kesha, try this spice blend. Little more cayenne, less salt." "You sure you're not my mother reincarnated?" Sarah laughed. "Honey, If I were, I'd already be telling you to get more sleep. Tommy and Marcus hammered nails together on the porch, the toddler wearing his little angel vest and safety goggles, 5 sizes too big. Every bang of his toy hammer drew cheers. Training him early, Tommy said proudly. Kesha's chest filled with something she hadn't felt since childhood: belonging. Not everyone celebrated. Across the street, Mrs. Henderson stood behind her lace curtains, eyes narrowed. Her perfect lawn was littered with sawdust from the renovation, and the constant rumble of voices disrupted her morning Bible study. When a reporter asked for her opinion, she hesitated. The camera lights caught her face, and for the first time, she looked uncertain rather than cruel. "I suppose," she said slowly, "it's nice to see people helping each other. We could all use more of that." It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. Around 3 p.m., a shout broke through the noise. "Timber, move!" One of the old sidewalls gave way too soon. Dust billowed. Kesha felt her stomach drop as boards crashed to the ground exactly where Marcus had been playing seconds before. Mike lunged, scooping the boy clear as the debris hit the porch with a deafening crack. When the dust settled, silence fell over the street. Kesha ran forward, panic rising. "Marcus, are you?" He blinked up from Mike's arms, more startled than hurt. "Boom," he said softly. The crowd exhaled as one. Kesha sank to her knees, tears streaming. Mike crouched beside her, his big hand resting gently on her shoulder. "He's all right, just a scare." She looked at the shattered wood, the house that had nearly taken her child, and realized how fragile all of this still was. Dreams, hope, safety they all needed. Constant rebuilding. When she met Mike's eyes, gratitude and fear collided in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded. "You've saved enough lives for one lifetime. Let us save yours once in a while." By sunset, the new structure stood firm. Wider porch, open dining area, shining kitchen visible through glass panels. Strings of bulbs stretched from house to house, turning the whole block into a carnival of light. Neighbors who had ignored her for years were now carrying platters of food, helping paint trim, laughing with the bikers. Children weaved between chrome bikes like fireflies. A TV anchor arrived for the evening broadcast. The microphone cable snaked between piles of lumber. "Tonight," she said, "a Detroit mother who lost everything gains not just a restaurant, but a family." Behind her, the camera caught Kesha hugging Martha, Danny, and Marcus, 3 generations bound by accident, courage, and fried chicken. When the tools finally fell silent, Mike climbed onto the porch steps. The crowd gathered instinctively, engines off, heads bare. The sunset painted their jackets in copper light. "We ride for many reasons," he began. "Some of us ride to escape, some to remember. But this is why we ride. Because one woman decided that fear wouldn't run her life." He turned to Kesha. "You opened your door to us. Today we open the world to you." Applause thundered down the street. Kesha shook her head, tears streaking her face. "I didn't do anything special," she said. "I just couldn't let people freeze to death on Christmas." Mike smiled. "That's the most special thing of all." Tommy stepped forward holding a large folder wrapped in red ribbon. "From the Brotherhood," he said. Inside were legal documents, deed transfer, business license, permits all signed and filed. "This place is yours now, officially," Mike said. "No landlord, no debt, no fear." Kesha covered her mouth. You can't just give me a house." "We didn't," Sarah cut in. "You earned it. We just made sure the paperwork caught up." Martha clapped her hands. "Then it's time for this kitchen to do what it was born to do. Feed people." Cheers erupted. Someone plugged in a speaker. Gospel music filled the night. The iron shields fired up grills along the street. turning the rebuild into a block-wide feast. Mrs. Henderson crossed the street slowly, clutching a casserole dish like a peace offering. Conversations quieted as she approached Kesha. "I owe you an apology," she said, voice shaking. "What I said before what I did, it was wrong. I let fear make me cruel." Kesha studied her. The memory of the shove, the words "bastard child," flickered in her mind and then faded. "We all get lost sometimes," Kesha said softly. "What matters is finding our way back." Mrs. Henderson nodded, tears spilling freely. "If you'll have me, I'd like to volunteer here, maybe wash dishes." Kesha smiled. "Everyone eats, everyone helps. That's the rule." The crowd broke into applause. Even Mike wiped at his eyes. Night deepened, fire barrels lined the street, casting flickering halos over the gathered crowd. Martha sat on the porch steps beside Danny, her hand never leaving his. "I spent 30 years praying for a sign my boy was alive," she said, "and the Lord sent him back on a motorcycle. That's a sense of humor if I ever saw one." Kesha laughed, the sound soft and free. "He sent all of you. Maybe he figured I needed a family, too." Mike joined them, holding a worn leather journal. "We keep records of every ride, every mission. This story goes in the book, The Maple Street Miracle." Kesha raised an eyebrow. "That what you're calling it? You got a better title." She thought for a moment, maybe just home. Around midnight, the bikers began preparing to leave. Engines rumbled to life one by one, filling the air with their low, comforting thunder. Mike strapped on his helmet but lingered beside her porch. "You ever need anything? Anything you call the number in that journal? Doesn't matter what time, doesn't matter where." Kesha nodded, holding out her hand. He ignored it and pulled her into a hug instead. Solid, fatherly, grounding. "Take care of that boy," he murmured. "He's got a whole army watching over him now." "I know," she whispered. As the procession began to roll out, headlights flared, engines roared, and 500 bikes moved in perfect formation down Maple Street. The ground shook, but this time it felt like the heartbeat of a new beginning. Neighbors lined the sidewalks waving, children cheering, cameras flashing. For a long, breath-holding moment, the street glowed with the red taillights of departure and hope. When silence finally returned, Kesha stood on her rebuilt porch. The new sign above her door gleamed under the streetlight. "Mama Kesha's Kitchen, where love is the secret ingredient." She whispered it aloud. Tasting the words, Marcus tugged her sleeve. "Mama, they come back again." "Maybe," she said, smiling. "But even if they don't, they're always here." She touched her heart, then his. He leaned his head against her shoulder. Inside, the new kitchen smelled of paint, steel, and a little leftover bacon. Tomorrow she would cook again, not just to survive, but to serve. And this time, the whole city would come hungry. The morning after the rebuild felt unreal. Sunlight spilled across Maple Street, glinting off the new restaurant sign. Mama Kesha's Kitchen shimmered in gold paint, the words curling like a promise. The air smelled of sawdust, fried batter, and something new: anticipation. Inside, Kesha stood behind the gleaming counter, hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the position of a plate. The tile floor still smelled of grout, the stainless steel counters gleamed like mirrors, and the new industrial fryer hummed with potential. Martha hovered near the back, straightening salt shakers that didn't need straightening. "You ready, baby?" she asked. Kesha took a deep breath. "I've been ready for years." At 10 a.m., the first customer stepped through the door, a postal worker in uniform, then 2 construction guys, then a whole line of people who'd seen the news and driven across town just to taste the food of the woman who fed the angels. By noon, the place was packed. The kitchen thundered with life, oil sizzling, phone clattering, orders being shouted and answered in chorus. Martha moved between tables with the authority of a queen, delivering plates stacked with golden fried chicken, collard greens, and cornbread that glowed like sunlight. "Best damn chicken I've ever had," shouted a truck driver at the counter, slapping the table for emphasis. "You'd better say that again, sire," Martha replied, grinning. Kesha could barely keep up with the orders. The rhythm of cooking felt like music, muscle memory wrapped in gratitude. For the first time in years, every movement had purpose. Marcus sat in a corner booth, proudly wearing his little angel vest, scribbling drawings of motorcycles on napkins. Occasionally, he'd run to deliver water to a customer and beam when they thanked him. By 3 p.m., Mama Kesha's kitchen had run out of chicken. Outside, a crowd still waited. The next day, local media returned in force. This time, they weren't just curious, they were hungry for a story. Cameras crowded the small dining room, boom mics hovering over tables while customers tried to eat around them. A young reporter with a flawless smile and corporate polish approached Kesha mid-service. "Miss Williams, how does it feel to go from unemployment to national headlines?" Kesha wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her arm. "Feels like I finally get to do what my mama raised me to do, feed people." "And what's next for Mama Kesha's kitchen?" the reporter pressed. "Just keeping the doors open," she said honestly. And keeping the food honest, her simple answers played across the evening news, with dramatic music and graphics, from broke to blessed. The Maple Street Miracle. By morning, orders poured in from all over Detroit, catering requests, online donations. Food vloggers wanted interviews. Even a national talk show had called to invite Kesha to appear. It should have felt like triumph, but instead, something restless stirred inside her. On the third day, a black SUV pulled up outside the restaurant. A woman in a beige suite stepped out, sunglasses gleaming, posture sharp as a knife. "Miss Williams," she said, extending a manicured hand. "I'm Renee Collier, talent management for Bright Star Media Group. We're interested in your story." Kesha blinked. "My story?" Renee smiled, the kind of smile that belonged on Billboard. "Your rise from hardship, your miracle moment. America loves a good redemption arc. We're talking television deals, a cookbook, maybe even a reality show." Martha's eyes narrowed. "Reality show? Yes, ma'am," Renee said smoothly. "Cameras, follow your life, your restaurant, your son, the whole journey. We call it Mama's Table." Kesha hesitated. "I don't know about cameras around my boy." Renee waved a hand dismissively. "Nothing invasive, just heartwarming content. People need hope these days. And you, Miss Williams, are hope on a plate." She slid a contract across the counter, pages dense with fine print. "We can start filming next week. There's real money in this. Enough to open 3 more restaurants." Kesha's eyes widened at the number on the last page. It was more money than she'd ever imagined. But something in her chest tightened. The paper smelled like toner and ambition, not like cornbread or love. "I'll think about it," she said softly. Renee left a business card on the counter. "Don't think too long. Media moves fast. You've got heat right now, don't let it cool." By evening, exhaustion had replaced euphoria. The restaurant was still buzzing, but Kesha's focus wavered. Every question from a customer, "Are you the woman from the news? Can we take a selfie?" added another layer of pressure. After closing, she sat in the quiet kitchen with Martha and Danny. The lights above them glowed warm and low. "They want to put me on TV," she said, sliding the contract across the table. Martha adjusted her glasses and skimmed the first few pages. "Lord have mercy. These people use more words to steal your soul than a preacher uses to save it." Danny leaned over. "They want rights to your name, your recipes, your image." That's everything you are, Martha said firmly. You sign that. You won't own yourself anymore. Kesha rubbed her temples. But the money could change everything. I could hire staff, expand the kitchen, maybe even start a daycare for moms like me. Martha reached across the table and took her hand. Baby, you already changed everything. Don't sell what can't be bought. For a long moment, Kesha said nothing. The refrigerator hummed softly in the silence. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle this time, as if the storm had come back just to listen. The next morning, a letter arrived in the mail. It was postmarked from Tennessee. Her hands trembled as she recognized the handwriting. Jerome Williams. She hadn't seen that name since the divorce. Inside was a single page, messy with regret. Kesha, saw you on TV. Proud of you. Guess I wasn't strong enough back then. I'd like to visit Marcus if you'll let me. Maybe make things right. Jerome. She stared at the words until they blurred. Part of her wanted to tear the letter in half. Another part wanted to cry. When she showed it to Martha, the older woman sighed. Men like that smell success, like wolves smell meat. Don't let him take what you built. I don't know what I'd say if he showed up. Kesha whispered. Then start with what you needed to hear back then. Martha said that you didn't need saving. You just needed respect. That evening, the storm came, not snow this time, but people. News spread online that Mama Kesha's kitchen had turned down Bright Star's offer. The internet divided instantly. Some called her a hero for staying authentic. Others mocked her for throwing away success. And then the reporters came back. Miss Williams, is it true you refused a $1.2 million contract? Do you regret it now that the hype's dying down? Are the bikers still supporting you? Or was that a PR stunt? Kesha froze at the questions. Her son tugged at her apron, frightened by the cameras flashing like lightning. Mike arrived minutes later, leather jacket dusted with snow. Expression grim. You need me to clear them out. No, she said quietly. I'll do it myself. She stepped outside, faced the microphone, and spoke clearly enough that even the wind paused to listen. I didn't feed those men for fame. I fed them because they were cold and hurt. I didn't open this kitchen to make money. I opened it to make room for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. You want a headline? Print that. Then she went back inside and shut the door. After the crowd dispersed, the restaurant sat in peaceful silence. The only light came from the stove's pilot flame, flickering like a heartbeat. Danny cleaned the counters in rhythmic motions. You know, Mike says the Brotherhood's planning something big, a rally for charity, all in your name. Kesha shook her head. No, not in my name, in my mother's, in every mother's. She walked to the window. Outside, the snow glowed under the streetlights, turning Maple Street into silver silk. Marcus slept in a booth, clutching his toy motorcycle. His breathing was soft, steady, a sound she had come to live for. Martha hummed an old gospel tune as she locked up, her voice gentle but sure. Kesha whispered, maybe the world doesn't need another TV show. Maybe it just needs a little more of this. Danny smiled. Quiet miracles. Yeah, she said. The kind that don't need cameras. At 11 p.m., the restaurant phone rang. Kesha almost didn't answer. It had been ringing all day, but something in her gut told her to pick up. Hello, a deep voice replied, one she hadn't heard since the blizzard. Mike here. Sorry for the late call. Mama K. Relief flooded her chest. You okay? Better than okay. We're planning a ride next month, charity tour. Mama's Meals across Michigan. Every stop. We'll serve your recipes and tell your story. You good with that? Her throat tightened. As long as the money goes to families who need it. Already done, he said. You taught us how to do this right. Before hanging up, Mike added, oh, and one more thing. We found an empty diner up north. Needs a good name. Thinking maybe Marcus's Place. Kesha smiled through tears. He'll love that. Good. See you soon. Mamaka. Ride safe. The line clicked. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full. The next morning, as dawn broke, Kesha walked alone through the quiet dining room. The golden letters on the sign outside glowed with the first light of day. She thought about all the versions of herself that had lived in this space. The scared woman counting $7 on a kitchen table, the mother trembling through a storm, the cook who opened her door to strangers, the business owner learning to say no. Each version had built the next. Each had left something behind. When Martha entered with her morning coffee, Kesha smiled. You know, she said, I used to think light was what happened when things finally got easy. But it's not. Martha raised an eyebrow. Oh, it's what happens when you keep your door open, even when it's dark. Martha nodded, her eyes warm with pride. That's my girl. Outside, the city began to wake. Cars hummed. A delivery truck pulled up with fresh produce. Across the street, Mrs. Henderson waved shyly before heading to church. Kesha unlocked the door and flipped the sign to open. The bell above the door chimed, echoing softly through the air. Marcus ran in from the back, laughing, his little feet slapping against the tile. Mama, customers, I see them. Baby. She tied her apron, adjusted the heat on the fryer, and smiled at the smell of oil warming to perfection. The day ahead would be busy, messy, unpredictable, but she was ready. The camera of life pulled back, showing the small restaurant glowing like a beacon in the gray Detroit morning, a mother, a child, and a street reborn by kindness. And somewhere far down the highway, the faint rumble of motorcycles rose again, like a promise that miracles never really end. It began on an ordinary Wednesday, the kind that tasted like routine and comfort. Kesha had just finished serving lunch to a group of factory workers when the doorbell chimed again. The sound was unremarkable except for how everything else suddenly seemed to stop. Martha froze mid-step, a plate of biscuits in her hand. Danny's conversation with a supplier died mid-sentence. Even Marcus, who was coloring on the floor, looked up as if he could sense something wrong. The man who stepped inside didn't belong to this world she'd built. Jerome Williams looked almost exactly like the ghost she'd tried to forget. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed too sharply for Maple Street, a crisp leather jacket, polished shoes, a faint scent of expensive cologne that didn't belong anywhere near the fryers and the grease and the laughter. For a second, Kesha thought she was imagining him the way you sometimes think you see a face in the crowd that can't possibly be real. But then he smiled, and her stomach dropped. Hey, Kesh, he said quietly. His voice was the same, smooth, familiar, dangerous. The entire restaurant seemed to shrink. Conversations dimmed into silence as the regulars realized the woman who fed half the neighborhood was suddenly pale as snow. Martha was the first to move. She set down the biscuits with a deliberate clatter. Can I help you, sire? Jerome looked at her, then back at Kesha. I think she knows me. Kesha's lips parted, but no sound came out. Danny stepped forward, protective by instinct. Whatever you need. Man, maybe you say it outside? Jerome raised both hands, easy smile, never faltering. I didn't come for trouble. I came for family. The word hit like a slap. Kesha led him to a small corner booth, far from the other diners. Martha kept herself within earshot, wiping the same counter over and over again, her eyes sharp as a hawk's. Jerome sat down, his hands folded neatly on the table, as if this were just another business lunch. Place looks good, he said. Didn't think I'd ever see you running your own thing. It's not just me, Kesha said quietly. I had help, he chuckled. Yeah, I saw that on TV. Whole countries talking about Mama Kesha. Gotta admit, never thought you'd make the news. Unless it was for shouting at somebody. She said nothing. He took her silence as permission to continue. I saw the interview, he said, voice dropping lower. Saw our boy too, Marcus. Looks just like May. He looks like himself, Kesha said, the words sharp enough to cut. Jerome leaned back, a small grin playing at his lips. You still got that fire. That's good. You'll need it if you're serious about keeping this place going. What do you want? Jerome, she asked. He hesitated just long enough for her to know the answer wasn't simple. I want to see my son. Her breath caught. You gave that up 8 months ago. I was sick, he said quickly. You know that. I was lost, but I've been getting help. Therapy. Church. I'm not that man anymore. Martha's voice carried softly from behind the counter. Every ghost says that before midnight, Jerome ignored her. Kesh, I messed up. I know it, but I see you now, this restaurant, the news, the community. You built something. I want to be part of it. For Marcus, for us, there it was. Us. The same poisoned dream she'd spent months exercising. Later that evening, Jerome returned this time with a briefcase. He waited until closing, helping himself to a stool at the counter, while Danny mopped the floor. Look, Jerome said, opening the case. Inside were printed documents. Neat and official. I've been working construction management down in Tennessee. Got a little money saved up. I could invest, help expand the business. Keisha blinked. You want to buy into Mama Kesha's kitchen, not buy in, he said smoothly. Partner, make it bigger. A chain. We could open 3, maybe 4 locations. 1 for every major city in Michigan. Martha gave a dry laugh. And who's we? Exactly. Family, Jerome said again. Marcus deserves a legacy. Don't you want that? Danny stopped mopping. Man, the only legacy that kid needs is his mama's heart. Kesha felt torn. The practical part of her brain whispered that money could mean security. No more scraping through bills. No more fear of collapse if business slowed. But another voice, quieter, yet stronger, warned her that this was the same man who had left when the world got hard. Why now? She asked finally. Because you made it, Jerome said honestly, and I want to make it right. That was the most dangerous truth of all. He believed it. Over the next week, Jerome didn't disappear. He came by every day, sometimes bringing gifts for Marcus, sometimes bringing spreadsheets for Keisha. He knew how to charm a room, how to flash a smile that softened suspicion. Even some customers started greeting him like a fixture. Marcus adored him instantly. The little boy would run across the dining room, shouting, "Daddy," before Kesha could stop him. Each time, it tore her in half. Half joy, half fear. Martha wasn't fooled. Snakes don't hiss at first, she warned. Danny, too, grew uneasy. He's building trust, the kind that gets you to sign something you don't read. Kesha wanted to believe she was stronger than that. She told herself she could handle him, that people could change. But one night, after closing, she found Jerome standing in her office, staring at the safe. I was just checking the books, he said easily when she caught him. You're keeping cash overnight. That's not safe. I don't remember asking for your advice. He smiled, unbothered. You used to. 2 days later, Jerome threw a family celebration. He rented out the restaurant for the evening, invited neighbors, brought in decorations, even hired a local photographer. Publicity, he said, good for business. For a few hours, it almost worked. Music played. Laughter filled the air, and Kesha allowed herself to relax. Marcus danced between tables, his little vest flashing under the lights. Then she noticed something strange. Jerome kept steering people toward a single table near the front, where the photographer lingered. Each photo framed him perfectly, smiling with Keisha, holding Marcus, raising a glass beside the restaurant's glowing sign. When she asked why, he said, "Presentation matters. People need to see a family behind the food." By the end of the night, she felt nauseous. This wasn't celebration. It was staging. Later, as she cleaned up, she saw a new post trending online. The Williams family empire begins. Mama Kesha's kitchen expands under husband's guidance. Her hands shook so violently. She dropped her phone. When Jerome arrived the next morning, he found her waiting at the counter. The article printed and underlined in red. "You did this," she demanded. He glanced at it. "Publicity's good for business." "It's lies. It's marketing," he corrected. "You think the people lining up outside care who left, they just want to believe in a happy ending." Her voice broke into a whisper. "You don't get to rewrite my story." He slammed his hand on the counter, the mask slipping. "I made you who you are, Kesha. You'd still be scraping floors if it weren't for me." Martha appeared from the kitchen like a storm, "and you'd still be running from your own reflection if it weren't for her." Jerome turned on her, anger darkening his features. "Stay out of this, old woman." "No," Kesha said, stepping forward. "You stay out of my house." He stared at her for a long moment, then smiled, a slow, dangerous thing. "Fine. But when the cameras call, remember, you'll always be the woman I made." He left the restaurant door swinging behind him. That night, snow began to fall again. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that hides things. Kesha stayed late, trying to focus on cleaning, on anything that wasn't the ache in her chest. She didn't see the shadow outside the window until the motion sensor light flicked on. Jerome stood by her sign, cigarette glowing between his fingers. When he saw her, he grinned and flicked the cigarette at the ground. Then he walked away. She didn't realize what he'd done until the next morning, when the bottom corner of her sign was blackened, the gold paint blistered from heat. The fire hadn't caught. Thank God. But the message was clear. Danny found her staring at it. "We calling the cops?" She shook her head slowly. "No, we rebuild." Again, Martha touched her shoulder. "You sure?" "Yes," Kesha said. "If I call the law, I stay his victim. If I rebuild, I stay free." 2 days later, a roar of engines filled Maple Street. The sound that once terrified her now felt like safety. Mike and the Hells Angels arrived in a long convoy, parking like guardians in front of the restaurant. Mike took one look at the damaged sign and exhaled. He did this, didn't he? Kesha didn't answer. She didn't need to. Tommy placed a calloused hand on her shoulder. "We'll fix it by sundown." True to their word, the sign was repainted by evening brighter, stronger, gold leaf, shining under the streetlights. Below it, Mike added a small metal plaque that read, "You can't burn what's built on love." 3 nights later, Jerome came back one last time. It was after closing, rain tapping against the windows, the kind of cold that seeps into bone. Kesha was alone, wiping the counter when the door creaked open. He looked different this time. The charm was gone. His eyes were bloodshot. Desperation replacing swagger. "I lost the job," he said. "They saw the article, said it was a lie. Everything's falling apart." "I'm sorry," she said softly, "but you did that, not me." He laughed bitterly. "You really think you're better than me now?" "No," Kesha said. "Just different." Jerome's face twisted. "You think they'll still love you when the cameras stop? You think those bikers are family? They'll move on." "Maybe," she said, "but I'll still be standing." He stared at her for a long, hollow moment, then dropped his head. "I just wanted to be seen again." "You were," she said. "Once, you just looked away." He nodded slowly, then left without another word. Outside, rain erased his footprints before the door could even close. When dawn came, the air was clean again. Martha found Kesha sitting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket. watching sunlight strike the new sign. Is he gone? Martha asked. Yeah, Kesha said. And I think this time, he knows it. Martha nodded. Then it's done. Kesha looked down the street where the frost sparkled like forgiveness. No, it's just beginning. There's still people out there who think they're alone. We've got work to do. She stood, opened the restaurant door, and flipped the sign to open. Inside, the fryer hissed to life, the smell of spices filling the air, the same scent that had saved her once. Marcus toddled in, rubbing his eyes, smiling sleepily. Morning, Mama. Morning, baby. You hungry? He nodded. Always. She laughed softly. That's my boy. Outside, the street came alive again. Neighbors, customers, friends. The city moving forward, as it always did. And though Jerome's shadow had passed, its absence left something purer behind. Light that no storm could ever touch. The news vans came first. By mid-morning, Maple Street looked less like a neighborhood and more like a stage. Camera crews lined the sidewalks. Reporters in sleek coats rehearsed stand-ups beside Kesha's restaurant sign, their voices crisp against the winter air. Once a struggling single mother, now the symbol of America's kindness revolution. Mama Kesha's kitchen. The phrase repeated like a hymn across every channel. Inside, the sound of sizzling oil was drowned out by the hum of attention. Kesha flipped another batch of chicken, her movements precise, deliberate, anything to drown the unease rising in her chest. Martha watched from the counter, arms crossed. They're circling. Honey, you can feel it in the air. Danny nodded from the register. Press smells success, the way sharks smell blood. Kesha tried to smile. Let them film. Maybe it'll help business. But deep down, she knew too much light could also burn. The man arrived just after lunch hour. He didn't look like the regulars, too polished. Too clean. Navy overcoat. Sharp jaw. Perfect hair. He waited patiently at the counter until the rush thinned. Ms. Williams, he said smoothly, flashing a practiced smile. I'm Colin Briggs, Vice President of Acquisitions for Urban Plate Group. She frowned. Never heard of it. Oh, we're a family of brands, he said easily. Urban Plate, Honey Farm, the Fry Loft. We specialize in helping promising restaurants scale nationally. We've been following your story. He slid a glossy folder across the counter. Inside were photos of modernized kitchens, polished signage, smiling franchise owners. We think Mama Kesha's kitchen could be the next American classic. With our capital, we could open 100 locations in 2 years. Martha let out a soft whistle. 100. Colin smiled at her as if addressing a child. Of course. With the right guidance, Kesha closed the folder. That's generous. But this place isn't about numbers. It's about people. Exactly, he said smoothly. And imagine how many more people you could reach if you let us help. She looked at the folder again, those spotless, identical restaurants gleaming under white light, and felt her stomach twist. I'll think about it. Please do, he said, sliding her his card. But don't think too long. Media attention fades fast. That night, Kesha sat at the kitchen table, with the folder open beside a cup of untouched coffee. The numbers were staggering. Signing bonus, royalties, national advertising, enough to secure Marcus's future, and then some. Danny leaned against the doorway, arms folded. You're not really considering it, are you? Part of me is, she admitted. I could give Marcus things I never had. Yeah, he said quietly, but you'd lose the thing that made this place real. Martha entered carrying a tray of biscuits. Sweetheart, corporate men don't buy dreams. They buy pieces of them, wrap them in plastic, and sell them back. Kesha said, I want him to be safe. If something happened to me, Martha's tone softened. Then you teach him what you already know, how to make something from nothing. That's worth more than money. The friar hissed in the background, filling the silence like a heartbeat. Kesha closed the folder and whispered, "Maybe you're right." But the numbers still glowed in her mind, long after she turned off the lights. The next morning, the headline hit every major outlet. Exclusive. Mama Kesha's Kitchen in talks for $1 million franchise deal. Cameras swarmed again, this time more aggressive. Kesha hadn't told anyone she was considering the offer except Danny and Martha, which meant someone else had leaked it. Urban Plate denied involvement. "We respect confidentiality," their press office said, but their CEO appeared on a talk show that same afternoon, praising Kesha's inspiring story and potential as a partner. Martha slammed the TV remote down. "They're trying to corner you. Make the public expect you to say yes." The phone rang non-stop. Reporters, investors, random strangers with advice. Even Mike called from Chicago. "You need a media shield," he said. "These suits play dirty. I can handle it." Kesha insisted, though her voice trembled. "Handling it doesn't mean doing it alone," Mike said gently. "Remember what we built this on, family. Don't forget that." 3 days later, Colin returned with reinforcements. A PR manager, a legal consultant, a photographer. They filled the small dining area, like they already owned it. "Ms. Williams," Colin said, smiling as if nothing was amiss. "Congratulations. The public response has been phenomenal. Let's make this official." He laid out contracts, bullet-pointed, highlighted. "We're offering $1 million upfront, full control of branding, and a 15% royalty share." Martha raised an eyebrow. "15% of your own name. It's standard," Colin said dismissively. "She keeps her recipes, her image. She just lets professionals take over the rest." Danny's jaw clenched. "You mean take it away?" Colin ignored him, turning to Kesha. "Look, this place is wonderful, but it's small. One bad quarter, one scandal, and it all disappears. We can make you untouchable." Kesha stared at the glossy logo, stamped across the papers. "Urban Plate Group presents Mama Kesha's Kitchen." Her fingers brushed the ink, then pulled back as if it burned. "What happens to my people?" she asked. "The neighbors, the bikers, Martha, Danny. They'll still have jobs," he said smoothly. "Just under new management." Something inside her hardened. "This kitchen was never built for management," she said quietly. "It was built for mercy." Colin blinked. "Excuse me." She stood, "Meeting's over." He packed up the papers, still smiling that corporate smile. "You'll change your mind. When the spotlight fades, so will the donations, the goodwill, the attention. And when that happens, call me." He left the card on the counter. It lay there like a threat. By Friday, the backlash began. Online comments split in two camps, half calling her a sellout, half calling her a fool. Talk shows debated whether she was too emotional to run a business. Someone even leaked a rumor that the Hells Angels were secretly funding her as a front for organized activities. The accusations were absurd, but they spread fast. Danny scrolled through his phone, fuming. "They're painting you like a criminal." Martha's tone was calm but sharp. "That's what power does when it can't control you. It rewrites your story." Kesha stared out the window where the first snow of the season had begun to fall. For the first time since the restaurant's rebirth, she felt fear again, not of poverty or cold, but of narrative. The kind written by others. "Maybe I should have just signed," she whispered. "At least then I'd control something." "No," Martha said firmly. "You'd just be agreeing to your own erasure." Saturday morning, they woke to shouting. A crowd had gathered outside, reporters mixed with hecklers holding signs, "Corporate Puppet," "Fraud Angel." Someone had even spray-painted "Fake Hero" on the sidewalk. Mike's convoy of bikers arrived within the hour. their engines cutting through the chaos like thunder. He dismounted and surveyed the scene. "You want us to clear this out?" "No," Kesha said. "They can scream all they want. I've lived through worse than worse." She stepped onto the porch. The cameras turned instantly. "You want to know the truth," she said, voice carrying steady across the winter air. "I was poor, I was scared, I was hungry, and when 25 strangers knocked on my door, I let them in. Not because I thought I'd be famous, but because it was the right thing to do." She paused, locking eyes with the nearest camera. "If you came here looking for scandal, there isn't one, just a kitchen, and a woman who refuses to sell it." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The anger softened just enough. Mike placed a hand on her shoulder. "Hell of a speech. Didn't plan it," she said. "Just got tired of people talking over me." By evening, most reporters had left. The few who stayed caught something unexpected: neighbors coming together again. Mrs. Henderson scrubbing the graffiti off the sidewalk. Local kids repainting the fence. Martha handing out cocoa to bikers and bystanders alike. Danny hung a new banner over the door. "No investors, no masters, just family." Inside, Kesha leaned against the counter, exhaustion pulling at her bones. Mike poured her a cup of coffee. "You realize that was a PR nuke?" "Right. The honest kind. Nobody saw it coming." She smiled faintly. "Good. Maybe now they'll remember why this started." He studied her face. "You know, you could still go national, just not like they want. We've got chapters in 30 states. Writers love your food. We could build it our way slow." "Real." Kesha looked at him, curiosity stirring. "You mean a cooperative?" "Exactly," Mike said. "Each chapter runs one, profits go back into the community. You keep control, no suits involved." For the first time in days, she felt the spark return. "Let's talk." The next weeks moved like fire through dry grass. What began as a conversation became a movement. The Brotherhood Kitchen Project. Bikers, veterans, and single parents across the country volunteered to help open small, local versions of Mama Kesha's Kitchen, community-run, non-profit, family-driven, no shareholders, no exploitation, just food and dignity. Martha managed the calls, Danny built the training manuals, and Mike coordinated logistics. Each new branch carried the same motto engraved on the door: built from kindness, protected by community. The press, once hostile, couldn't resist the narrative turn. Headlines shifted from scandal to revolution, from single mother to national movement. How Mama Kesha outsmarted corporate America. When Kesha read that one aloud, everyone in the kitchen burst into laughter. One evening, after the final customer left, Kesha stood by the window watching the snow fall again, soft, endless, forgiving. Marcus was asleep upstairs, clutching the small leather vest Tommy had made him. The kitchen lights glowed warm against the dark. Martha joined her, 2 mugs of cocoa in hand. "You realize you've started a wave, don't you?" Kesha smiled. "I didn't start anything. I just opened a door." Danny poked his head out from the pantry, grinning, and the whole damn country walked in. They all laughed quietly, the kind of laughter that comes after surviving something hard. Outside, the snow kept falling soft, relentless, erasing footprints, writing new ones. Hours later, the street was empty again. Kesha, locked up, turned off the light, and paused by the new plaque Mike had installed by the door. "You can't burn what's built on love." She touched the cool metal, smiled, and whispered to the quiet, "Not even the spotlight." Then she stepped into the snow, the sound of her footsteps steady and sure. The first camera arrived before sunrise. By 7 a.m., 3 more vans lined the curb outside Mama Kesha's kitchen, their satellite dishes pointed skyward, breath steaming in the cold Detroit air. Reporters wrapped in scarves and ambition leaned against metal barricades, waiting for a glimpse of the woman America now called the soul of the storm. Inside, the smell of biscuits and fried chicken filled the air, but Kesha's stomach was too tight to eat. She stood by the window, watching as the cameras multiplied like frost patterns on glass. Marcus tugged at her apron. "Mama, why they all out there? They just want to talk." "Baby," she said softly, "about kindness." He tilted his head. "Kindness needs cameras." The question hit harder than she expected. A week after the scandal's fallout, Kesha's name had exploded across every screen. Talk shows, podcasts, op-eds. Everyone wanted a piece of the miracle. CNN called her the woman who fed a storm. A streaming platform offered to buy her life rights for a documentary titled Mama of Mercy. There were hashtags, charity drives, even merchandise. She should have felt proud. Instead, she felt invaded. Every time she opened the door to greet customers, there was a microphone waiting. Every time she smiled for a photo, it felt less like gratitude and more like extraction. People taking slices of her story to feed their own narratives. Danny tried to handle the press requests, but even he was drowning. "They want you on Good Morning America." "Kesh." Then the mayor's office called. "They're giving you a civic award next month." "I didn't do this for awards," she said quietly. "I just wanted to make sure people ate." Mike, leaning against the doorframe, added, "That's why they trust you. But fame's like fire, warm if you stand back, deadly if you touch it." The next visitor wasn't a reporter, it was a producer. Her name was Cynthia Brandt, and she carried herself like someone who owned every room she entered. Tailored suit, perfect smile, eyes that missed nothing. She slid a glossy folder across Keisha's table. Mama Keisha, the series. A limited-run docudrama from Golden Path Studios. "We're talking national distribution," Cynthia said smoothly. 8 episodes. You'd get full producer credit and a significant share of profits. "I don't need profits," Kesha said. "I need peace." "Peace doesn't pay for expansion," Cynthia countered. "Think bigger scholarships, grants, nationwide kitchens. This could feed millions." Mike crossed his arms. "At what cost?" "Authenticity," Cynthia said without hesitation. "We'll keep it raw, real. The public wants inspiration and control." Kesha asked. "You'll have a say," Cynthia said. "Too quickly. We just handle the editing, the soundtrack, the creative direction." Martha, sitting nearby, cut in. "Translation. They'll use your pain like seasoning." The producer's smile faltered. "Mrs. Martha," she said firmly, "and we've had enough people making a meal out of this woman's suffering." Cynthia stood, her tone cooling. "The offer stands. But the world won't wait forever to tell your story." When she left, the silence was heavy. Kesha stared at the untouched contract. The words, global distribution rights, burning into her vision. Danny broke it first. "She's not wrong about reach. Kesh, imagine how many people we could help." "Maybe," Kesha murmured. "But helping people doesn't mean handing them your soul." That night, after closing, Kesha noticed a man lingering near the curb. He wasn't a reporter, no badge, no camera, just a worn leather jacket and a face half hidden by the brim of his cap. When she stepped outside, he turned toward her. "Ms. Williams." His voice was soft, polite. "You don't know me, but my name's Tyler Finch. I'm with the Detroit Journal. Not mainstream. I write human interest features. I've met enough journalists for a lifetime." She said wearily. "I'm not here for headlines," he replied. "I'm here for truth." Something in his tone, humble, almost reverent, made her pause. "Truth's expensive," she said. "You got the budget for it." He smiled faintly. "No, but I got time." He told her he'd grown up 2 blocks away. raised by a mother who worked double shifts and still came home to cook for the neighborhood kids. She used to say kindness is the only currency that never loses value. He said, when your story hit, it felt like home. Kesha studied him. No pretense, no angle. All right, Mr. Finch, you want truth. Come back tomorrow morning, but you're eating breakfast first. Tyler returned at dawn. He didn't bring a camera crew, just a notepad and quiet respect. They talked for hours about her mother's recipe, the night of the storm, the roar of 500 bikes that changed everything. But Tyler didn't focus on fame or scandal. He asked about loneliness, fear, forgiveness. Do you ever miss the quiet before all this? He asked. Kesha stirred her coffee. Every day. But quiet and peace aren't the same thing. Quiet's what you get when no one cares. Peace is what you earn after people finally do. When the interview ended, he didn't rush to leave. He looked around at the dining room filled with laughter and clatter, with neighbors who once wouldn't make eye contact. People say you started a movement, he said. But I think you reminded us what decency looks like. For the first time in weeks, Kesha smiled without feeling watched. Then right that, 2 days later, she wished she hadn't spoken at all. The article went viral, but not because of Tyler. Someone else had leaked private footage from her security cameras. A recording of the night of the blizzard, her crying in the dark kitchen before the bikers arrived. The internet devoured it. Headlines called it the real face of Mama Kesha. Some praised her vulnerability, others mocked her poverty. Memes, edits, reactions. Marcus saw one of them on a tablet at daycare. Why they laughing? Mama. She took the device gently, her voice trembling. Because some people don't understand what courage looks like. That night, she turned off every screen in the house. For the first time since the storm, she locked the door not to keep danger out, but to keep the world from coming in. When Mike found her the next morning, she was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her reflection in a cooling cup of coffee. You can't disappear, he said. They'll twist the silence into something worse. I didn't ask for any of this, she whispered. All I did was open a door. Yeah, he said softly, and that's what terrifies them. You made goodness contagious. And that scares people who make money off fear. Martha entered, holding a folded newspaper. Baby, you need to see this. On the front page was Tyler's follow-up article. You can't cancel kindness. It condemned the leaks and exposed the media companies exploiting her footage. The story spread faster than the scandal itself. Underneath the headline was a quote, "The measure of a person isn't how they rise in comfort, it's how they stay kind in exposure." Kesha Williams. Her eyes filled with tears. I never said that. No, Martha said, smiling, but you lived it. A week later, the restaurant was busier than ever, but among the new faces, one stopped her cold. A man in a brown jacket, nervously clutching a cap in his hand. Jerome, she whispered. Her ex-husband looked thinner, older. Shame hung on him like dust. I saw you on TV, he said. Didn't know where else to go. The air seemed to thicken. You had 8 months to come home before Marcus forgot your voice, she said. I was scared, he admitted. Scared I wasn't enough. Scared I'd mess it up worse. Then why now? He looked around the restaurant, the laughter, the unity, the mural of 500 motorcycles painted across the back wall. Because you built something I used to think didn't exist. I want to help, even if it's just washing dishes. Martha stepped forward, protective, as always. You don't get to walk in and rewrite the story. Kesha held up a hand. Let him try. Jerome blinked. You'd let me. I'd let anyone try, she said quietly. That's the rule here. For the first time in years, he smiled, not confident, just human. That night, after closing, Kesha stood outside again. The street was quiet, no cameras, no crowds, just the hum of life returning to normal. Tyler's article had changed the tide. The media frenzy was fading. Offers still came in book deals, movie scripts, but she ignored them all. Instead, she started something smaller. A foundation for single parents, one that offered warmth, food, and, most importantly, dignity. Mike called it the second storm, one we choose. But even as the foundation grew, Kesha wrestled with one question that wouldn't leave her. Was kindness still kindness if the world turned it into spectacle? Late one evening, as she scrubbed down the counters, Marcus padded into the kitchen in his pajamas. "Mama," he said sleepily, "why you work when everyone gone?" She smiled, drying her hands, "Because someone's got to make sure there's light when they come back." On the anniversary of the storm, the networks aired a 1-hour special called The Night the Angels Came Home. Kesha didn't agree to it, but she didn't stop it either. Instead of glamour, the program focused on real footage. The cold, the fear, the laughter in the candlelight. The story ended with a simple shot of the rebuilt restaurant, neon sign glowing against the dark. Millions watched in silence, and for one night, the internet was quiet, not mocking, not dissecting, just listening. The next morning, Kesha woke to find a letter slid under her door. No return address, just 4 words in block handwriting. "You kept the light." She didn't need to know who sent it. 6 months later, the storm was just a story, but its echo still shaped every sunrise on Maple Street. The foundation had expanded to 3 more neighborhoods. Jerome worked the morning shift, quietly repairing what he'd broken. Tyler's book, Fire and Tenderness, had become a bestseller. All proceeds donated to community kitchens nationwide. And through it all, Mama Kesha's kitchen remained the heart of it all. One morning, as she unlocked the door, she noticed something new on the sidewalk. Someone had carved into the cement overnight rough letters. Uneven, but sincere. "Kindness lives here." She crouched down, tracing the letters with her fingers, and smiled. Marcus ran up beside her, backpack bouncing. "Mama, who wrote it, doesn't matter. Baby," she said, "what matters is they meant it." As the sun rose over Detroit, its light spilled through the restaurant windows, catching on the photographs that lined the walls, faces of bikers, neighbors, and strangers who had once been lost and now were found. Kesha flipped the sign to open, and in that moment, quiet, unfilmed, uncelebrated, she felt peace. Not the peace of quiet, but the peace of purpose. The morning started the way most mornings did now, quietly, purposefully, with the scent of biscuits rising through warm air. Kesha stood in the kitchen of Mama Kesha's kitchen, her hands moving by instinct, rolling, folding, brushing melted butter across the tops of golden crusts. Outside, the world had changed, but the rhythm inside her kitchen hadn't. It was still the same prayer whispered in motion. The clock read 5:32 a.m. The city outside was still waking, and so was she. "Mama," Marcus called from the stairs, his voice deeper now. No longer the lisp of a toddler, but the tone of a young man. "In here, baby," she said, smiling before she even turned. Ian Taird, tall now, shoulders broad under his jacket, eyes still the same deep brown. 18 years had carved time softly around them both. He was leaving for college that morning on a scholarship from the Kindness Lives Foundation, the very program that bore her name. He held a steaming mug toward her. "Half milk, half coffee, 2 sugars." Like always, she took it, pretending not to tear up. "You remember, hard to forget the sound of your morning. Ma, the whisk, the sizzle, the hum of that old fridge. You've been playing the same song for 18 years. She laughed softly. "And you still haven't learned the harmony." The restaurant opened at 6, and the regulars began to trickle in: the postal worker, the retired bus driver, the young nurse from the hospital down the street. They all knew it was Marcus's last morning before heading to Atlanta. "Can't believe the boy's leaving," Tommy said, walking in with his same old leather vest. The words "Little Angel" were faded now, but still legible. "Wasn't he just climbing the counter for cookies last week?" "Feels like it," Keisha replied, tying her apron tighter to hide her shaking hands. Mike entered next, his beard grayer, his walk slower, but his presence no less commanding. He'd driven in from Ohio just for the send-off. "Man's got wings now," he said, placing a heavy hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You raised him right." Marcus grinned. "You all did." The restaurant buzzed with low conversation, the clinking of silverware, and laughter that wrapped around the walls like memory. There was a new mural above the counter, a collage of faces: the bikers, Martha, Danny, neighbors, and one inscription that read, "Storms end, kindness doesn't." By 8 a.m., the entire community had gathered. Martha, frail but radiant at 86, sat near the front window wrapped in her favorite shawl. Danny stood beside her, now married with a child of his own. Mrs. Henderson, hair silver, heart soft, had baked pies for everyone. Kesha looked around and realized she was standing in the middle of what her mother had always prayed for. Not a restaurant, but a circle. Before Marcus left, Mike pulled a small wooden box from his jacket. It was old, hand-carved, edges worn smooth by time. "This belonged to Emily," he said quietly, referencing his daughter, long gone but never forgotten. "She used to keep trinkets in it. Stickers, feathers, bottle caps. Kids collect hope in strange ways." Marcus hesitated. "Sir, I can't." "You can," Mike said firmly. "You remind me of her, and your mama reminds me what love looks like when it grows up." He placed the box in Marcus's hand. Inside lay a single motorcycle key on a chain, engraved with the words, "Keep riding." Martha dabbed her eyes. "That boy's gonna move mountains." Marcus hugged them both, and for a moment the restaurant became a chapel. Every breath a prayer of gratitude. When the time came to leave, Kesha walked him to the old pickup truck that Mike and the Angels had refurbished years ago. It gleamed under the morning light, the same color as cornbread. The neighborhood gathered on the sidewalks, clapping, waving, calling out blessings. Even the kids who hadn't been born when the storm happened shouted, "Bye, Marcus." He turned back before getting in. "Mama." "Yeah, baby. Promise me you'll rest a little." "I'll rest when kindness runs out," she said, smiling through tears. He climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and rolled down the window. "Then I guess you'll never rest." She laughed, a sound caught between pride and heartbreak. As the truck pulled away, she raised her hand, palm open in the air, a silent blessing. And when he turned the corner, she whispered to the wind, "Ride safe, little Angle." The day moved on. Customers came and went. The world, as it does, refused to stop for sentiment. By sunset, the restaurant was empty again. Kesha sat in the same booth where her son had done homework for years. His old notebooks still lined the shelf beside the counter: math equations, doodles, dreams. The sound of laughter had faded into the hum of the refrigerators. Outside, Detroit glowed under streetlights and memory. She closed her eyes, listening to the rhythm of her breathing against the stillness. It reminded her of that first night after the storm. The difference now was the warmth that filled the silence. It was not loneliness, it was legacy. A bell jingled. She looked up to see a man at the door, a familiar face, older but unmistakable. Tyler Finch, the journalist who had once written her story with such care. "Didn't think you'd remember me," he said. "Hard to forget the man who gave me back my name." She replied, "Come in. You hungry?" "Always." He sat at the counter, notebook in hand, though this time he didn't open it. "I'm writing a follow-up," he said, "not about fame or miracles, about what comes after them." She poured him coffee. "After is Keter, but it's where the real work happened." He looked around at the photos, the plaques, the laughter that lingered like invisible steam. "You ever think about retiring? From cooking?" "Never." "From caring?" "Kent." He smiled. "That's your headline." That night, after locking up, Kesha walked to the back garden, a small space behind the restaurant that the Angels had helped her build years ago. It was overgrown now, wild with lavender and mint, but still carried the scent of stories. She lit a candle and placed it on the stone marked Mama's hands. A memorial dedicated to her mother. "Still cooking your recipes?" "Mama," she whispered, still trying to get the seasoning right. The wind rustled the herbs as if in reply. Then she heard the faint, familiar sound of motorcycles in the distance. Not loud, not near, just enough to make her heart ache with gratitude. The Angels still visited, though less often now. Some had passed, others had moved away, but their brotherhood lived on. Every year, bringing new riders to her door on the anniversary of the blizzard. They always left a token: patches, letters, photographs. She kept them all in a tin box under the counter. Kindness, she'd realized, was like those riders. You never owned it, you just hosted it until it moved on. A few weeks later, she received an envelope stamped with a university seal. It wasn't from Marcus, it was addressed to Mama Kesha's kitchen. Inside was a letter from a social work professor in Atlanta, explaining that Marcus had started a campus project. The Storm Table, a mobile kitchen that served free meals to students in need, built on the principles his mother had lived by. He'd written a note at the bottom in his uneven handwriting: "Mama, you said kindness never runs out. I'm making sure it keeps riding. P.S. The first dish we served was Grandma's fried chicken." She pressed the paper to her chest and laughed through tears. Her boy had taken the fire and carried it forward. Months later, the Hells Angels Brotherhood returned, fewer this time, maybe 30 instead of 1,500. But the noise still shook the street like a heartbeat. Mike led them, older, slower, but smiling. "We heard you became a grandma in spirit," he teased, handing her a photo of Marcus and his student volunteers. "The kids got your fire. They stayed for dinner: fried chicken, biscuits, greens." Laughter. As the night deepened, Mike leaned closer. "We've been thinking," he said, "when we're gone, this place, this kitchen, it's more than a restaurant. It's a sanctuary. Maybe it's time to make it official." He handed her a folder. Articles of incorporation. The Lighthouse Foundation. Community kitchens. Veteran outreach. Single mothers. "Every city we've got a chapter," he said. "We'll build them all under one name. Yours." Her hand trembled. "Mike, I can't." "You already did," he interrupted. "We're just following your recipe." That winter, Detroit faced another storm. Nothing like the blizzard years ago, but enough to remind her of how it all began. The power flickered, the wind howled, and for a moment she was back there, cold, terrified, holding a baby against her chest. Only now, she wasn't alone. There were volunteers in the kitchen, candles prepped, food ready for anyone stranded. Neighbors brought blankets. Students hauled supplies. And across the street, Mrs. Henderson's old house now glowed, with lights converted into a shelter named The Haven. The storm passed quickly, leaving only silence and snow-dusted roofs. But as she watched the glow from her windows, Kesha understood something profound. Her story wasn't about survival anymore. It was about inheritance, the way goodness multiplies when given away freely. Years later, after the foundation had grown into a network across the Midwest, Kesha's health began to wane. The doctors spoke gently: heart strain, fatigue. age catching up. She refused hospitals. She wanted to stay in her kitchen. That final morning, the restaurant was closed to the public, but her family blood and chosen gathered. Martha was gone now, her spirit living in every loaf of bread. Danny stood by the stove, cooking under Kesha's supervision one last time. "Too much salt," she murmured, smiling weakly. Mike sat beside her, his large hands dwarfing hers. "You did it, Kesh. You turned a storm into a city." She chuckled softly. "No, Mike, we all did." The sound of motorcycles echoed faintly in the distance, a final tribute. As the candlelight flickered, she whispered, "Tell Marcus to keep the doors open, no matter what." He nodded. "Always." When the morning sun broke through the kitchen window, it caught on the photo wall. 25 bikers, one mother, one child, and hundreds of faces that had joined since. Beneath it hung a brass plaque, Mama Keisha's Kitchen, founded 2025. Still feeding souls. Marcus returned that afternoon, carrying his son on his hip. The restaurant was quieter now, but a live staff working, laughter drifting. He placed a candle by the counter and lit it. "Hey, Mama," he said softly, "we're still riding." Outside, the sound of distant engines rose once more, rolling thunder across the city skyline. And for those who stood on Maple Street that day, they swore the light from the kitchen windows looked different, warmer, steadier, as if the flame inside refused to die. A single sentence engraved beneath the mural, added years later by the foundation's volunteers: "Kindness doesn't end when we do. It just finds another kitchen." Fade out. Sometimes, life's fiercest storms don't come with thunder or lightning. They come quietly, in the form of loneliness, judgment, and the feeling that the world has forgotten your name. Mama Keisha's Kitchen reminds us that one open door, one shared meal, one small act of courage can ripple farther than we'll ever see. True strength isn't measured by how loudly we fight, but by how gently we choose to stay kind when kindness costs us something. In a world quick to divide, compassion is rebellion. It breaks the silence that shame builds. It mends the bridges prejudice burns, and it reminds us that dignity isn't given, it's lived. Like the saying goes, real gold fears no fire. The people who choose empathy in a cruel season are the ones who light the way for everyone else. Whether you've been judged for who you are, dismissed for where you came from, or told you don't belong, remember, storms don't last forever, but good hearts do. So tonight, maybe look around and ask yourself, who needs a bit of warmth from your kitchen, your heart, your time? Because every act of grace you offer has the power to rewrite not only someone else's story, but your own. If this story touched something in you, tell us in the comments. Share your own moment of kindness, or a time when someone opened their door for you. Hit that like button to keep these stories alive, and subscribe so you won't miss the next tale of courage, truth, and second chances. Until then, may your table stay warm, your heart stay open, and may peace find you even on the stormiest nights.